Welcome everyone to our Earth Month series sponsored by Legacy Partners in Environmental Education. I'm Michael Robinson. I'm here along with Dr. David Klein. We are board members at Legacy Partners in Environmental Education, and we, as part of the program committee, are happy to present this Earth Month series starting this today with Dr. Brantley. Legacy, of course, was created back in 1992 by some individuals that were interested in providing some quality environmental education materials to the citizens of Alabama. So we work as a partnership with all groups that are interested in environmental education, helping to develop and provide environmental education programs and to prevent duplication of efforts by supporting other environmental programs in Alabama. Our funding comes primarily from our tag, as you see on the screen here. So we invite you to get the tag when you renew your tags this year, if you haven't done so already, because this is the sale of the Protect Our Environment license tag helps to sponsor these programs, along with other money from donations, corporate sponsors, grants, and special events. We would like to also invite you to attend our next educator workshop. Bats, Bees, and Butterflies Educator Workshop will be held April 30th at UAB, the UAB Solar House. And it should be a very engaging workshop where they will be discussing bats, bees, and butterflies and their importance to our world. If you would like to register for that workshop, you see our URL at the bottom of this page, our website. And if you go to that website and click on Educator Excursions, you will find the Bats, Bees, and Butterflies Educator Workshop, which is April 30th, 2022 at UAB. We also have other Earth Month series presentations this month, next week, April 14th. On the next slide, you will see Mrs. Nancy McGowan in Shades Mountain Elementary School will be presenting Eco Adventures. Shades Mountain Elementary School was the BEEP awardee for school programs at the Environmental Education Association's conference. On April 21st, Mr. Tim Young, principal at Charles R. Drew Middle School in Talladega County, will be presenting. That school is this year's Alabama's Green Ribbon Schools awardee. So they will be talking about some of the things they're doing in their school. And on April 28th, Gulf Coast Sustainability Academy with Krista Markham, AP biology teacher, Jessica Sampley, who is a supervisor in the central office there, and Amanda Talantis, who is one of the Korean technical education instructors. We'll talk about some of the things that they are doing with Science by the Shore, Small Town, Big Garden. It is an exciting program down in Gulf Shores High School, Gulf Shores School District, and we invite you to attend all of those. And now David will introduce Dr. Brantley.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. I'd like to introduce Eve Brantley. Anybody who knows Eve, she's very likable and full of energy, and she has to be, because to be able to change all the hats that she wears. But she's a professor and environmental or extension specialist in the Department of Crop Soils and Environmental Sciences at Auburn University. And she's also become the director of the Auburn University Water Resources Center. And she's going to tell us about, she's going to get us inspired about water today and remind us that everybody lives downstream from somebody. And that means you also live upstream from somebody else. So I'm going to leave. If you would, feel free to throw in any other things that you would like people to know about you, because I don't know that we have another 15 minutes to list all of your accolades.
Well, hey, my biggest accolade is getting invited to talk with you all today, and I'm very excited. What I'd like to start this presentation off with is a note that a lot of what I will be describing today is information that teachers, both formal and non-formal, can get from our Extension Water Resources programs. We have Exploring Alabama's Living Streams, and I have some links to this later on. The Alabama Water Watch program, which is a very successful 4-H component, as well as adult citizen science. And 2 new programs, the Alabama Watershed Stewards, that's really appropriate for just about any age group, and our private well water program. So as I'm moving through this, and those of you that are educators, if you're interested in learning more about some of our teacher programs and educator workshops, feel free to get in touch with me, and you'll see those how to get to us on the internet coming up soon. So, hey, all right, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump in. I'm Eve Brantley, and I have spent the past 22 years or so here with Extension, and really have gotten a chance to know our state and many of the people in our state. So anytime I start a presentation about water, and some of you, like Stan Arrington, are really experts on this information. So as I move through it, if you already know it, just hang in there with me. I might have some fun facts that you can spin in and use differently. We talk about 132,000 miles of streams and rivers. And one day we were sitting in a meeting and I said, well, how does that compare to other states? We have a lot of rivers and streams in our state compared to other states. So just think about this as the next time you drive down the road. If you're on the coast, it's pretty flat, but there's still some of those hills. Just look out your window as you go down to the bottom of a hill. Probably there's going to be a stream or a river or a wetland. We can barely go a mile or two without crossing some sort of water feature. This is really pulled together when you consider that 10% of the water in the continental US either flows through or originates in Alabama. So we're one state out of the lower 48. We get 10% of all that water. That's a really big amount. We have more navigable river miles. This is, of course, was a huge economic boost to our state, so much so that they put the rivers on our state seal as an advertisement. Come to our state. We can move your goods up and down rivers. So yeah, we got a lot of water resources, and perhaps you're familiar with America's Amazon, right? So we've got incredible freshwater biodiversity. And, I just use the word critters because it's fun when you talk to school kids and grown-ups alike to just say, that creek is alive. The top fish, the picture that you see here in the top, this is my story about him. And it is a him, right, Stan? If you already know the fish, don't shout it out. So I took a picture. There were some folks noodling around in a creek, and I took a picture of this gorgeous darter, and I sent it to a friend of mine who's an ichthyology professor here at Auburn. She immediately texted back and said, well, what are you doing in Pinson on Turkey Creek? And I have to tell you, I was a little bit stunned. I was like, how do you know where I am? I mean, we're friends, but why do you know where I am? And she said, that vermilion darter is only found in Turkey Creek in Pinson, Alabama. The only place. We have a lot of endemic species like this that are only found in certain parts of our state, making our stewardship responsibility really important. So you see the numbers here, 300 species of fish, 99 species of crayfish. My friend Rebecca Bearden, Dr. Bearden works with Geological Survey of Alabama, and she is so excited as I get just talking about water resources in Alabama. That's Dr. Bearden and crayfish. I cannot believe we don't have the 100 species yet. I know she's probably out turning over rocks and stomping in a creek somewhere looking for that 100 species. I asked her to send me her favorite crayfish, and it was this one. Isn't this a gorgeous crayfish? The celestial crayfish. Look at that blue color. So we've got a lot of streams, we've got a lot of rivers, we've got a lot of life within those rivers. And so what I'd like to do today is talk about opportunities that we have for personal stewardship and to share that inspirational message with others, maybe your students, maybe when you're eating dinner tonight. So vocabulary for today, watershed and polluted runoff. That's really the big picture of what I'd like to bring home. And again, as part of our Water Resources Center curricula, we have this information that's appropriate for educators to pass on to students of different age ranges. So watershed, polluted runoff. Let's start with watershed. All right, so as we look at annual precipitation in the United States, Alabama gets on average 55 inches of rain a year. Tremendous amount of rain when you compare it to our colleagues and friends out west. So when that rain falls, every drop of rain falls into a watershed. Think of a watershed as nature's boundary. It's that area of land that when it rains, the rainwater collects into streams, moves to a single river or a single point, and there's a basin outlet. I like to think about it like your bathtub, right? The watershed of your bathtub all ends up in the drain. So we're gonna, I hope I remember to use the bathtub analogy coming up soon. So a watershed, nature's boundary, it's how water flows through the landscape to a single outlet. Now in Alabama, we have 14 major river basins. And wherever you are right now, you all out in virtual world, please take a look roughly at where you are. You might already know your river basin address. But what I really want you to pay attention to, as Dr. Klein said, we all live downstream from somebody, right? So you'll see that of our major river basins, many of them start in other states, our sister states. So because watersheds are nature's boundaries, not political boundaries, that means that we need to be thoughtful of working across state lines and county lines and city lines. So working with Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Florida, because we're contributing to Florida and we're gaining water from these other sister states. So all of these river basins, then, how does that relate to a watershed? Well, it's a little bit like a nesting doll, right? You know, those nesting dolls that have the big doll, like a river basin, and it's made up of the smaller basins, watersheds, sub-watersheds, and catchments. I had a friend running a watershed education program down on the coast, and she sent out flyers, get to know your watershed. And someone called her and said, I'd like to get out of my watershed. I don't like any parts of this. And she was like, well, you can't. If you leave this watershed, you'll just be going to a different watershed. So it's a good reminder that no matter where we are, our actions can be reflected in local water quality. So just as an example then, let's take a look at watersheds in Birmingham. My friend Hannah Barris, who does a great job with stormwater and watershed education for Jefferson County, likes to talk about the Vulcan statue being the separator between the Black Warrior watershed, that river basin, and the Cahaba River watershed. So then if you break those down, you start to get the village creeks and the 5 Mile Creek. Let's see if it'll go. Oh, this must be a really, there, oh, hell, well, it went fast. Let's go back up, there we go. So you could see all these little creeks, they work together in their watersheds. And so this is it. So now we know watershed. We got that vocabulary term down. Nature's boundaries. How is water flowing through the landscape? And this is the point that is really important. The quality of water is reflected by how we use the land in those watersheds. So what we do on the land influences water quality. And a lot of not just our state, but the entire world is moving toward more urban areas. So here we are, we've got nature's boundaries that are now a lot of people are moving into concentrated areas. So knowing that our urban population is increasing, along with that, people need a place to live. And I live in a suburban area. What comes along with that land conversion from more natural forested area? Here's just a quick Google map look at an interstate exchange. So you see over time, this is 1997. Here we go into 2006. So there's been some clearing of more natural cover. Now we've got even more neighborhoods, commercial developments, and along with that, and I'm not saying development is bad, but it comes with some trade-offs, right? So besides just having more places to live, we see there's an impact on soil itself, land compaction, removing that vegetation, erosion and transport of soil to waterways sometimes, increases in impervious surfaces, and we'll spend some time on that. And then stormwater management that looks at how do we collect water and move it quickly away. So let's start with impervious surfaces. I have a friend who likes to say the hardest surface in the world is the human head, but truly, impervious surfaces are those areas where stormwater cannot soak in. Water's not able to percolate into the ground. So think about concrete, asphalt, compacted soil. We just talked about that on the previous slide. So instead of soaking in, water is now shed and it runs off pretty quickly. If we take a look at a typical urban scene, if we were all in a classroom, I would say, okay, on the count of three, everybody shout out some impervious surfaces you see. But virtually, I want you to, if you're in your office by yourself, you can just shout it out, or you can think it loudly. So impervious surfaces across the landscape that we're seeing in this particular slide. All right, roads, gotcha. So we have a lot of car habitat. Oh, parking for the cars. So we've got roads and parking for the cars. Buildings, of course. So now we've got rooftops that are impervious. Sidewalks, concrete, not allowing stormwater to soak in. And lastly, driveways. So these impervious surfaces, the reason I'm taking a moment to really talk through these is that they have a direct influence on water quantity. So we're going to talk about quality in a minute, but first I want to talk about quantity. So here is a cartoon graph. On the x-axis, we've got time. On the y-axis, we've got stream flow in cubic feet per second. So here's our nice forested, more natural landscape. We get a storm. There it is. And then this is the typical response of flow rate in a stream. You see, we've got storm, the water comes up, water slowly goes down. For the past 2 days in Alabama, we have got some pretty intense storms. And in our more urban areas, I know particularly in Auburn, where I live and work, we had river flood warnings. Some of this is due to the shift in our land use to more impervious surfaces. So now, in comparison, when it rains, you see there's a much different hydrograph. There's a much different response of that water flow in streams and rivers, where the water, there's more runoff and it arrives quicker, right? So this hydrograph, it's actually pretty famous in the world of water and talking about water resources and the response of streams and rivers. But a colleague of mine and I had a game camera up. This is Christmas. Let me see if I can get this to go. So this is Christmas 2015, where we had similar, very intense rains. And this is what that hydrograph looks like when you're looking at a real river. Yeah. So that's more runoff arriving quickly. So I show that to say that our urban streams and our suburban waterways, there's a lot that we're asking them to take on. And the result of some of those high flows can be extreme stream erosion. That sounds like a new reality show. But this is my colleague, Ron, who works for the city of Auburn, and he's standing next to an extremely eroded stream bank. So this begins to be a concern when you've got this much water, this much storm water entering a stream, and now maybe we're worried about loss of property, threats to infrastructure. Okay, so we're going to move to stormwater now. So we've got all this rain, it's not soaking in. Now we're calling it stormwater. Stormwater washes across the landscape and flows into those water bodies. Okay, so now we've talked about quantity. Let's talk about quality. We've got more stormwater and it's arriving quicker, but what is it carrying with it? And this is where, again, our Water Watch program and our Watershed Stewards program really work to get to the deeper parts of this, right? So common pollutants, you probably are familiar with this, and if you're not, you're about to be, so hold on to your socks. Oh, there's plenty to go around. Think about an urban landscape, and when it rains, as it has this week, everything looks fresh and clean because a lot of it has been washed into our local waterways. Everything from litter to pet waste, concerns with untreated waste, maybe from failing septic systems or old infrastructure, sediment, oil and gas. Oh, we're going to talk about all of these things. So we're going to step through the categories and then we're going to talk about ways that homeowners, students, schools, anybody can be part of the solution. So excess nutrients. Too much fertilizers, too much of a good thing. Algae is a plant. Plants like fertilizer, put too much in, you get algae blooms. The concern with this, of course, some of you may have heard of harmful algal blooms. We don't want to encourage algal blooming as those algae either die and fall to the bottom and decompose, they use up oxygen, or at night when they're not photosynthesizing but respiring, they're also using up oxygen. So it's a concern for fish and fish kills. Plus it's just, it's not at all pretty to have a scummy pond or a scummy nutrient-filled water system. Another pollutant of concern, bacteria, pathogens, untreated animal waste. Besides the concern to human health and pet health, it's just really disgusting. So, okay, we've got this category of bacteria, we've got excess nutrients. These are things that I think people would commonly think of. A pollutant that's maybe not so commonly thought of is sediment pollution. In fact, after these big rain events, and clay is such a small particle, if you take a look at ponds and even man-made structures like Dave, the art museum's pond right now, it's just chocolate covered. It's just this red clay, really, really cloudy, turbid is that term, turbid water body. So the concern here, all that excess sediment smothers out habitat for fish, for insects. Remember all the critters that we need to be protecting. It's really, right, Stan, it's really abrasive to fish gills. It's so as the fish are trying to get that dissolved oxygen through their gills, and those of you who are fish people can appreciate it's really stressful for those aquatic creatures. And it also fills in ponds and fills in reservoirs, increasing treatment costs potentially. All right, so moving on with our pollutants, pesticides, using too much pesticide. How about parking lots? I'll just leave this here. So of course we think about what might be coming out of cars, but next picture is a picture from one of these stormwater practices that we have here in Auburn. And you see all of this stuff. This is the unraveling of asphalt. This is the debris from tires that are wearing down, brake pads. I mean, it's that all good. There's a reason we have to repave streets and why you have to get new tires. And that's not just disappearing, right? That's collecting and moving into streams and rivers with each of our storm events if we don't treat it. So the polluted stormwater runoff, we understand watersheds. The watersheds collect water, transport across the landscape as stormwater, And polluted stormwater runoff or non-point source pollution, that is the category of concerns and pollutants that's the cause of most of our water quality concerns. Those two bottles, this is just in a storm drain down from my house where you can see there's excess nutrients in the crazy street gutter. So the two bottles there, again, one of my colleagues and I, we were interested in if we collected stormwater from a parking lot and analyzed it, what sort of experiments could we do? And so that dark jug, that's water that we collected off of a parking lot at Auburn University. And that's not unique. This is what's flowing into streams and rivers if we don't do something to stop and treat it or collect it or minimize it. And when I say that, that is again to really emphasize that stormwater, that polluted stormwater runoff, going into storm drains does not mean it's treated. Many times it's a direct connection to our local waterways. So washing out a paint can that goes to a storm drain ends up into our surface waters. All right, so that's something simple to connect people to and inspire some stewardship. That non-point source pollution, meaning there's not just one, it's not just one person, one cow, one goose. There's not just one car out there causing all the problems. It's all of us collectively, which is good news because that means we can all play a role. What people think when they think of pollution in water are these pipes just chugging out waste and terrible things. We're really fortunate. The Clean Water Act has helped us greatly improve water quality in the United States, but we still have a ways to go and we still have an opportunity. All right, so what are we gonna do? We got petways, we got green ponds. I mean, even talk about hot water and how hot water is so stressful when it's coming off these parking lots because we've removed vegetation. There's a lot, right? So, okay, what are we going to do? Well, this is the best part. We know we can do things to make this better. All right. What are we going to do? We got smart people like David Klein, like Mona Dominguez, Laura Bell. We got great people with extension here and all throughout the state with other universities and groups that not only know how to do this, but really enjoy teaching others about it. So we can plan, right? Let's plan around nature, maybe as we grow, because again, I really like my house. I'm happy that I have a place to live. It doesn't mean that development is a bad idea. It means bad development is a bad idea. There are ways to grow that balance out nature and what we need to have for our cities and our suburban areas. We can do innovative site design. So after we plan with our landscape in mind, how we actually build things on site, commercial developments, residential. Those are things that engineers, site designers, I mean, there are folks working on green infrastructure, right? So instead of just focusing everything in pipes, let's go green. And the green infrastructure part is here, number 3, which I'd like to spend the next 15, 20 minutes talking through some of the programs and practices that we promote through, again, Water Watch, the Watershed Stewards program, and then just general water resource education here with Extension. So these land stewardship and water-friendly practices, if I were to stop and go back and say, all right, look, y'all, we know that sediment's a problem. We know pesticides, excess nutrients, pet waste. We don't really have to scratch our heads that much to figure out what some of the solutions are. Tying together that storm drains can be a direct conduit to our surface waters. Let me think about this. Pretty straightforward. Let's be mindful of how we treat our watersheds, the activities that our activities in our watersheds, the land use practices, all of these things start to come together to some pretty simple steps, right? I've got pictures, so it's not just going to be this. I've actually got pictures of happy people doing impactful things coming up. put trash where it belongs, protect and plant streamside forests, pet waste, pick it up and dispose of it. Read the directions before putting out chemicals. I'll talk about different practices that we can have at our homes, at our schools, at our places of business. When you mow your lawn, consider letting the mulch drop instead of bagging it up. And for heaven's sakes, don't sweep it down the drain. Don't use a leaf blower to blow it down the storm drain. Cover up the soil that's in your yard to protect downstream water sources. And when you use water resources and go enjoy them for kayaking, for recreation, for fishing, just be kind to them. All right, so let's start with number one. Put trash where it belongs. I mean, I know you all, as educators, probably, you know, if there's a trash can right here, are kids actually hitting the mark of getting trash in the trash can? Or when classes change, you're having to pick up some wrappers or say, get back in here and pick that up. So trash is not only unsightly for local streams, landscapes, but of course it can be potentially harmful, not only for wildlife, but for humans. So making it an effort to put trash in the right place, it's not difficult. This is Naomi, who was one of our student workers. This is at Chihuahua Park. People were literally putting trash next to the trash can. They were not putting trash in the trash can. So we partnered up to paint the trash cans bright colors and just get people to put trash in the trash cans. And I'm here to tell you that the superintendent said, you know, actually it really did help. Just making it more visible made it less of a mystery of where to put the trash. So we have litter cleanup events with cities, with 4-H clubs, with Boys and Girls Clubs, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. It's an easy way to make a big impact. And it also really makes people think about, I hope, maybe I shouldn't just throw that, you know, bag of fast food out my car window. Somebody's gonna have to pick it up. So putting trash where it belongs, I think one of the simplest things to really make an impact in water resources. Even maybe a step up, but not all that difficult, is to protect those streamside forests. All right, so imagine, if you will, you're a fish, right? Pretend like you're the vermilion darter from earlier. Which stream would you want to live in? All right, the top one or the bottom one? I'm going to guess most of us, if we were a vermilion darter, well, except we'd have to be in Turkey Creek in Pinson, Alabama, we're going to pick the shaded stream over the stream that has no vegetation and bare clay. Better habitat, cooler water, means more dissolved oxygen. All of those leaves and the sticks that are in the creek, these are all helping as food supply, as well as just really nice hiding areas, right? So it's not to mention, so we've got leaves providing shade, but the roots are helping to hold that stream bank in place. Now, they're not going to be able to hold that huge volume of water that we saw earlier. That's just a lot of stormwater, and that takes a little bit more ecological engineering to address that imbalance of water quantity. But keeping vegetation on a stream can help minimize erosion. Also, really important habitat corridors, especially again, as we are increasing our urban and suburban areas, having that wildlife corridor is important. Don't want to forget, these streamside plants are amazing at transforming pollutants. So we talked about nutrients. Well, hey, let's get the nitrogen and the phosphorus transformed into more leaves or more roots instead of going straight to a creek. But not all green is good. All right, so I'm a big fan of green. If you can, on this list, you can think about your least favorite of the invasive plants, the non-native plants that are really taking over a lot of ecosystems. And along a creek, it's like a core, it's mentioned wildlife corridor, it's like a conveyor belt for invasive species. So up top, of course, we have kudzu. At the bottom, we have Chinese privet, and somewhere in there is somebody is one of my research partners, and she's doing a study on Chinese privet, but you can't find her. We rescued her. She made it out okay. Don't worry. But it's like these plants come in and they're not the same for habitat, right? I know we talk a lot about pollinator plants and native plants. Same thing holds along creeks. We want to get those native plants in that are adapted for this area, for wildlife, and those leaves, when they drop into the water, they aren't the same leaf quality as our native leaves. So they're not a good food source. Not all of them. All right. So we're going to take care of streamside forests, and we're going to see what we can do to get some native plants in there. How about my favorite? We start talking about poop. Now you get people paying attention. In fact, we're so juvenile at the Water Resources Center that a few years ago, we invented a game called the poop toss game, where we bought this. You see this young man, we would go to the different city parks and environmental fairs, and we would put out fake dog poop just to see if people would like, oh, you know, and then we're like, oh, it's okay. It's fake, but don't you think we should pick it up? And then we'd have a little game to see who could toss the poop from the, you know, like an egg toss, where you take a step back and you toss, take a step back. It was a ridiculous hit, and I hope to revive it again. We really enjoyed, probably too much, throwing fake poop around. It's a great way to make people smile, a great way to get people to think about picking up that pet waste. Again, millions of bacteria in pet waste. How about get that up? At several of our city parks here, and I know across, I really think this is catching on, pet waste trash cans. I mean, it's like, just pick up the pet waste. And I actually try and be trying to think of the right word, the right descriptor. Maybe thoughtful when I see somebody's pet not getting their pet waste picked up. I'm like, oh, hey, I have an extra bag if you don't have one. And sometimes they glare at me. Most of the time they say, hey, thanks, I appreciate that, because nobody likes to step in poop. We call that SIP, step in poop. All right, so moving on to the next, again, you know, just read the directions on you. If it says 1 pound of fertilizer, 10 pounds isn't going to be better. 10 pounds is wasting money. Then you end up with all the algae and excess fertilizer runoff from your yard. And neighbors talk about you. No, I'm just kidding. They probably, I mean, maybe they don't. My office here is I'm in the Auburn University soil water forage testing facility. So if you don't know about soil tests, it's a very inexpensive way to find out what your lawn and garden needs are. Then you purchase what's needed, saves you money. I would hold up my pocketbook if I had one. And you get to protect your watershed, right? All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to read the directions. We're going to get a soil test to find out what we need in the way of fertilizers. We're not going to just blast out pesticides everywhere, because, you know, there are good insects, right? Beneficial insects. So here we go. Coming down to not really the end. We still have several more slides. So sorry, I didn't mean to get your hopes up. As a homeowner, as a person who lives in an apartment, as a person who has a job in a building, there are some things that we can do to slow that stormwater down, spread it out, and allow it to soak in. Rain barrels or cisterns, right? This is the newest of the most ancient technologies, collecting stormwater, collecting rainwater to use it later. So here's one of our extension colleagues who's now retired, Tony Glover, at the Coleman Agriplex. And you'll see he's got a rain barrel, 55 gallons, and a big cistern. I think it's a 500-gallon cistern. There's a tremendous amount of rain that comes out in 1 inch of rain. Yesterday, I had 1 inch and a smidge of rain in my rain gauge. Look at that. On a 2,000 square, let's pretend my house is 2,000 square feet even. That's 1,250 gallons of water for the taking. Storing that and then using it slowly as you need it, again, helps slow that energy down. It won't stop those huge flashy flows, but just think if everybody took just a little step to slow some of that water down. Maybe, well, and it's been raining a lot, so people aren't really paying attention yet, but when the next drought comes, you'll hear a lot about rainwater harvesting. Speaking of rainwater, there is a residential practice called rain garden. So you see, these are literally gardens that just slow rain down. They are designed, and I'll give you a link to the book that shows you how to do it. They're designed to capture that first inch of rain. Okay, so you remember that jug with all the dark water that was gross, and I was like, that's what's going. We took the first inch of rainwater, we made our own rainwater, poured it out on the parking lot. That jug was the first flush, right? So it's, again, this is the bathtub I was talking about. So it's like when you hop into the shower, for the first 10 seconds or so, most of that dirt's coming off of you. Same thing with our landscapes. That first 1 inch of water has most of the pollutants in it. So these rain gardens catch that water, allow it to soak in, and if you've got the right types of soils that allow that infiltration rate, for 2 days or less, you have a little bit of water, and then you get free watering of your plants. We use native vegetation to, again, really encourage those pollinators. Rain gardens don't have to be huge. This is a rain garden at the bottom of the hill, one of my neighbors, just slowing that water down, spreading it out, and allowing it to soak in. A lot of what I'm talking about today, this is our extension webpage. Maybe you're familiar with it, aces.edu. If you go to this webpage and type rain garden, we have a very nice handbook, how to install a rain garden. It gives you step-by-step instructions on how to size it, how to do an infiltration test, the plants to use, all sorts of, and I think a couple of case studies too, just to really talk through how it's worked for others. We also have information on rainwater harvesting, so be sure and check that out. I had a chance to talk with folks from the green industry, golf courses, parks and rec, and folks who have their own yard businesses. And I said, hey, have you ever considered just letting the grass clippings drop? And they were all like, yeah, we would love to do that. It's less work for us and it's better for the lawn. And I said, well, why don't you? And they said, the clients don't want it. Clients don't want it. So this again gets to that inspiration and education. Letting the grass clippings drop is a little bit like free fertilizer. It's not a little bit, it is. It's returning nutrients back to your lawn, right? So the grass comes up. Okay, well, you cut it, well, just let it get back in. And then there's concern with thatch buildup. Okay, well, there's different ways to manage that. But this is a very, again, personal preference. Some people just like to have that stuff bagged up. And if you do, that's fine, but please don't blow it down the storm drain. Again, remember, storm drain's connected to our local waters. And when those grass clippings begin to decompose, that's taking oxygen from the water too. So we're creating a couple stresses. All right, so we are getting down close to the end here. Sediment, if you can protect your soil from a raindrop, you are well on your way to protecting water quality. Bare soil is really susceptible to that raindrop energy coming down, boom, raindrop hits the soil, breaks apart those soil particles, and they're available to wash away. So this is a pretty extreme example. This is not from somebody's house. This is from actually a single construction site. That soil, again, clay really stays suspended, washes in. Largemouth bass, other bass, they're site predators, right? So they can't, it makes it hard for them to see, much less get dissolved oxygen. We talked about the gills, and it covers up habitat, smothers the stream bottom. So protecting your soil, plus you don't want to keep losing soil. We want to keep the soil where it belongs. Cover up that soil with straw, cover it up with mulch, get something planted on it, and it will go a long way to protect downstream water quality. All right, so then the fun A, speaking of bass, here's my friend Rachel with a largemouth bass. She was really proud of that. It was a pretty one. This is from Sagahatchee Creek. So we really want to encourage people to get out and enjoy streams, have a good time, but be mindful trampling stream banks, of removing vegetation unnecessarily, unless it's non-native invasive, then go ahead and take it out and plant back native plants. And just be thoughtful of how we are treating our resources so that others will have a chance to enjoy them. So I mentioned several of our programs that we have here at the Water Resources Center, as we're coming down to a time to talk through questions you might have, experiences that you might want to share, or success stories that you've had looking at water stewardship. This is my 13-year-old who is very happy. He's always interested in helping with litter pickups. I'm sure you can see the joy on his face. We have several great programs that are designed for the general public, for teachers, for clubs, and to really get people excited about making that connection between their activities and water resources. Alabama Water Watch has been, I think we're going on our 30th year. It's a citizen science program where you take part in a workshop. You learn about bacteria monitoring, again, getting back to the pathogens, to the bacteria that we talked about. Physical and chemical monitoring. So here we are with, this is an example of the hardness parameter, where you go out to a creek, collect the water. I mean, if you can bake a cake, you can do this water chemistry. It is very straightforward, and the Water Watch team here is just so dedicated, and the volunteers around the state and the volunteer trainers. The map that you see here, those green dots, those are active water monitoring sites. So you can go to alabamawaterwatch.org and check out if there's a site near you that's available, or maybe there's a group who's already monitoring, and you could easily get involved with an established group. The idea is you don't just take 1 or 2 samples, but you build, it's like you're building a relationship with your stream or your lake or your river. You're going out every month or more if you'd like, and you're getting to know, what does the dissolved oxygen look like in July as compared to February? Am I seeing something of concern with pH? Or am I seeing that there's improved water quality because maybe some of the actions that have been taken through Watershed Stewardship? So the Watershed Stewardship program, and I mentioned all these happy folks, learning about who in their community is interested in partnering on water quality projects, watershed groups, local cities. Many cities and counties in Alabama have, just by regulation, by stormwater rule, need to partner for public education and public involvement. So there's a good chance that if you're in a larger city or a medium-sized city, there might be some programs available to just go ahead and plug into. The Watershed Stewards program, actually, they have all the resources. I was talking about rain gardens and rain barrels, as well as videos on pet waste. We're not obsessed with pet waste, but it is something fun to get people excited about. You can find a link to each of these programs, plus the private well water program that talks about your responsibility as a domestic well water owner to get your drinking water tested, where to get that tested, and then how to interpret the results. So I encourage you to take a look at our Water Resource Center website, get to know some of the programs, the teacher training programs, citizen science, watershed stewardship. We have so happy to get back together in person. We have a lot of workshops planned for the summer and fall already, and would love to see you all there.